And welcome to episode 16 of Terpenes and Testing, the podcast. This broadcast is brought to you by Mace Media Group and Terpenes and Testing Magazine, the industry's first publication dedicated to cannabis science. I'm Jason Lupoi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Terpenes and Testing, and I'll be your host as we navigate across the landscape of cannabis and psychedelics science. Ancient plants like cannabis and magic mushrooms offer a transcending pathway away from the issues with many pharmaceutical drugs. Although cannabis and mushrooms have been beside us for millennia, ripe for the plucking to help us in myriad ways, the powers that be in the 20th century branded these plants as Schedule I drugs, devoid of medicinal power. This wrongful persecution prevented many people from accessing natural substances that provide a wealth of therapeutic applications for contemporary conditions like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And while our embrace with Mother Nature seems to be getting tighter each day, our wellness is still hindered by politics that continue to label cannabis and psilocybin-containing mushrooms as Schedule I, which prevents researchers from freely unlocking the secrets of each substance. And this inhibits humankind from reaching within ourselves to find happier, healthier, and more meaningful existences. But the times are indeed changing as more states have continued to take matters into their own jurisdictions by legalizing cannabis and decriminalizing or legalizing, in the case of Oregon, magic mushrooms. Parallel to this, unprejudiced clinicians and frontier-bound researchers have begun to delve deeper into these plants, providing a validating volume of research that highlights how these molecules could have been helping us this whole time. So for this episode, I wanted to speak with Dr. Nigam Arora. Dr. Arora currently serves as founding partner at Marcu Arora, a boutique consulting firm specializing in life science aspects of cannabis and psychedelics. Marcu Arora works with a range of clients from multinational cannabis companies to psychedelics manufacturers and venture capital firms. Dr. Arora completed his PhD in interdisciplinary life science at Purdue University, where he focused on projects with propensity for translation from bench technologies to market products. And over the past several years, Dr. Arora has dedicated his time to working with cannabis companies in many facets. He's worked on the executive team of multiple cannabis companies, as well as contributing to projects as an independent consultant. Areas of work have included research and data analytics, business operations and communications, obtaining and managing state licensed facilities across multiple types and jurisdictions, and development of novel cannabis products. And throughout his career, Dr. Arora has been involved with advocacy. At an early age, he organized benefit events for underserved populations. And during his time at university, spent 3 years as a Sam H. Jones Community Service Scholar, volunteering with nonprofit organizations. In 2018, he was a vocal advocate for formation of the cannabis research license category in Massachusetts. And in 2019, he served on the policy committee of the Humboldt County Growers Alliance in California. So, Dr. Arora, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
So, to kickstart the conversation, I'm always kind of interested in how people got involved with the cannabis industry. I think we all have our pathways kind of leading us all to this industry, and I'm wondering how you got involved with the cannabis industry and what being a part of this industry has meant for you personally and for your career.
Yeah, that's a good starting place. So, yeah, I got involved officially in 2017. It was pretty soon after graduate school for me. I'd always had a deep interest in, what we call in the pharmaceutical heavy Western world, alternative or holistic medicine. For myself, I'm half Indian, and so these kind of Eastern teachings, herbal remedies, holistic remedies, were part of my upbringing. It was something I was familiar with from the beginning. And then, pursuing my PhD in fundamental sciences, specifically in organic and analytical chemistry, it really kind of seemed natural when after graduating, I had moved to Massachusetts, and the laws were changing, the opportunity was right there in front of me, and it just seemed like my moment to get in, and so I went for it, and things have been going. I wouldn't tell anyone that it's an easy road. I mean, it's definitely a rocky road trying to do novel and meaningful work in the cannabis space. But I have enjoyed doing it, and I like the part of your question that says, what does it mean to me? So I think to me, I like to do things that are, like I just said, meaningful and to some degree challenging. Um, so I think having an impact on some of the things I think we're going to discuss later, patient safety, novel products, stuff like that, and just being a positive force in what is still a volatile industry. I think that's the biggest meaning for me, and something that I really try to promote.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel the same way, and I think that this opportunity, I moved to Colorado, and shortly after I got there, I was able to get involved with the cannabis industry from an ancillary instrumentation perspective, and what I noticed right off the bat is the industry really needs everything, and so somebody could dedicate their education and their expertise to this industry and be making an impact.
Absolutely.
I'm curious if you could talk about how Marcu and Aurora came to life, and also what services you provide to your clients.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So Marcu and Arora is the consulting firm that myself and my business partner, Dr. Jehan Marcu, founded in 2020. So, for folks who aren't familiar with Dr. Marcu's work, he is among the most knowledgeable cannabinoid pharmacologists presently active in the field, and he's also done a ton of pioneering work in policy, safety, standards, and some other areas over the last 20 years or so. So Jehan and I met through our mutual work at the American Chemical Society, and we stayed in touch. And in 2020, we kind of saw the opportunity to bring our combined skill sets in chemistry, pharmacology, safety, novel products, all of those areas, to kind of bring those to the fore, and to help clients to benefit from our skill sets and improve some of their products, or their safety standards, or their due diligence in this, and from the scientific perspective. So yeah, we started it in 2020, and things have been going really well since then. I feel like we've made a pretty significant impact just in the last couple of years. And I can share a couple of or some of the services that we really enjoy providing. So one of them is technical reporting on novel substances and the related safety. So these could be, the minor and the rare cannabinoids are becoming more popular all the time, but they're less well characterized or studied than, for example, THC, which we have a good idea of, the safety from long millennia of use. Also, same thing for newer novel chemical entities. Again, that the safety aspects, the therapeutic potentials are really important to understand from an early phase. So we enjoy doing that kind of work. We also do some technical project management, a lot in the R&D space, whether that's managing specific R&D projects for clients, or we've contributed to some lab builds for R&D labs that have specific goals that we're very experienced in. So those have been cool. And another area that um, has been really, I would say, just a privilege to work in, is doing a good amount of due diligence um, for folks who are investing, for example, venture capital firms or similar, who are investing in science heavy psychedelics companies or cannabis companies. And we provide that support to help investors and VCs make good decisions related to their investments into these companies that are saying we have, scientific product or theory or whatever it is, X, Y, and Z, and helping validate those things for investors to make sure they're getting the best possible outcome from their investment. So we do a couple other things related to our relationships with academia and experience with government relations, and just some general advisement as well from the kind of holistic experience we've had. Jahan and I combined 30 plus years in cannabis, psychedelics, life sciences in general. So we've been able to provide significant value to our clients, and just like the theme that's kind of emerging in this conversation, I found it to be meaningful, and we've enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things there that I want to take a deeper dive into, and one thing, part of what you just talked about is educating people. You mentioned specifically doing some due diligence for educating venture capitalists, and our content theme for June was cannabis education. So a lot of our content on the website was centered around that and how we can advance this. And I'm curious, as a PhD in the industry, how do you think we can best educate those new to the industry that don't have scientific backgrounds, and how can we keep science as a part of this conversation without losing the audience?
Yeah, great question. I want to segment a little bit between folks who are, you know, working in the space as let's call it executives or similar, or investors or similar, that kind of professional monetary involvement, and then folks who are consumers, so or patients. So for the first group, I think that having competent scientists on your team, or having folks that you can bring in as advisors, is extremely important. I think it's really, really important to be honest about what you know and about what you don't know. So I've really enjoyed working with groups who are involved in the industry in that first category I mentioned, who are wise enough and honest enough to say, hey, we need help, and then go out and seek help from a group such as our firm, or from someone similar. Sometimes you'll see companies that have scientific advisory boards that are really top notch, and that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Or sometimes you'll see companies that make claims, and they don't have good advisors, or they don't have good scientists on their team, and that's certainly of concern. So I would encourage folks to who are involved professionally to consider that. On the other side, when it comes to patients and consumers, it's a little bit of a different situation. So, I might be a little bit biased, but I actually find that folks are pretty hungry to learn. And I'm talking consumers, patients. I mean, being a professional in the field and a scientist, I live in California, so it's very normal and fine to discuss cannabis openly in a social situation. And I can hardly have a social interaction without people find out what my job is, and they want to ask me about, oh well, can you tell me about Delta 8, or can you tell me about CBD for my family member's condition, or can you tell me about X and Y and Z? And I'll pick and choose where I engage, but I've just sensed the hunger. I feel like when people realize that there's a resource in front of them, they're hungry for it. So I guess the thing I'll close with is you don't always have a great resource right in front of you. So I think it is important for those resources to be available to folks, to be easy to find, and to be both palatable to folks who maybe aren't scientists, and also enable people to dive deeper if they want. So I'll just say like a couple quick examples. So I think it's important for the companies that really care about this to educate their employees and their staff. So for example, we have some clients of the firm who actually brought us in to do seminars for their staff. So they have Jahan giving them a seminar on the endocannabinoid system and some product stuff and this kind of thing. And I think that provides a lot of value. And then um, just for providing content to consumers, I want to highlight Jason, you and I a few years ago did a proceedings publication from Cannabis Symposia at the American Chemical Society National Conference. And I think stuff like that is great because it's in an industry magazine. It's palatable to anybody who wants to read it. And if you want to dive deeper, you can go look at the work of these people who have PhDs or MDs and are active in the field, or you can dig into the references. You know, you can go in a PubMed dive and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about it, but those are some thoughts about education and cannabis. You know.
Yeah, I appreciate your insights there, and that's one of the things we've tried to strive for. I've always been a huge Carl Sagan fan, and he was very skilled at relating science to everyday people, bringing it into their households and making it enjoyable. So that's always kind of been my goal, and that's educating. I've had some opportunities to do that with some senior citizens here in Pittsburgh, and I've been so impressed at how many questions they've had. It hasn't been a taboo hard sell. People have actually stood up in the audience and said this is a miracle, and it was really a rewarding experience. And here in Pennsylvania, we had a product recall recently that left a lot of people worried about what they had been inhaling. There was the Department of Health basically came out and said some of the ingredients in vaporizable products might not be safe. And this happened 5 years into the medical program. And you were talking about product safety. And I wanted to get that back to that for a minute and ask, what your thoughts on that recall were. And, just in general, what you see as some of the more pressing needs for the cannabis industry to tackle such that we position ourselves for success.
Yeah. So that's so important. And we had actually discussed this recall on we do our own podcast called How to Launch an Industry, and we spent half an hour discussing this exact topic, and just because we thought it was important. And actually, frankly, it didn't get that much press, which kind of surprised me, because as someone who works in quality and safety and the science of cannabis, I thought it was kind of a big deal. So
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, happy to discuss it a little bit. So, I think it goes back to, if we talk about the fundamentals, it's like you were saying earlier, there's this weird thing in cannabis, and obviously it has to do with federal prohibition, that there's this constant need to reinvent the wheel. And I honestly can't wait for it to be over. But so you have this situation, like you were saying, where there were certain ingredients that 5 years down the road, the state government or state department of health is saying, okay, these may not be safe. And then, just to share a little more of the story with the listener, then the companies had a strong reaction to that, and they said, okay, well, why didn't you tell us that, and so on and so forth. And there was contention. And then from what I understand, these companies actually went so far as forming a separate entity to take legal action against the state and say this shouldn't have happened, or it shouldn't have happened like this, we lost money, so on and so forth. And it became this big contentious thing. But to me, none of what I just said is the fundamental or is the most important thing. The fundamental and the most important thing is, what is good for patients? What is safe for patients? There is this thing about flower, that yes, the consumption of flower can be a little bit more complex than, or less discreet than, using a vaporizer pen, or than taking some finished product such as an edible or a tablet or whatever. But there is something about, as I said earlier, and Jason, you said in your intro, the huge history of use, that we can understand the safety a little bit. Now, when it comes to these new areas of vaporizer cartridges, which they've been around for 7 or 10 years, and some of these other new products that have been around for even a shorter period of time. The baseline issue is, and this isn't just in Pennsylvania, I think the Pennsylvania thing was a pretty big blip on the radar for someone like me. But I think it just speaks to a larger issue, which is that there aren't, in most of the states or in most of the markets, there aren't strict regulations about what can and cannot be included in things like a vape cart or things like a finished product. And for there to be, products that are safe for consumers at the level that, over the counter products are safe, or that, food products are safe, that have been approved by the FDA. There's going to a lot of work that needs to be done. And I hope it's okay. I just wanted to shout out some really great work going on with some colleagues of ours at ASTM International, with Dave Valancourt from GMP Collective and Darwin Millard, are both important guys in that group at D37 Cannabis Committee at ASTM. And these are exactly the things that they're doing. They're working on international standards for all kinds of things related to cannabis processing and products and similar. There's also work going on at US Pharmacopoeia on a similar thing. At some point, inevitably, the FDA is going to get involved. And once again, similar to the education thing, I could talk about this all day. But I'm not sure if I kind of hit what you wanted me to on that Pennsylvania thing.
Yeah, I think it was kind of I mean, there's good aspects to it in that the state did take some action. My understanding is that, and my knowledge on some of the products that were suspect, is that they contained flavoring agents that were not cannabis derived. And in the documentation for Pennsylvania, any ingredient that was from outside of cannabis had to be approved by the state before it could be used. And I'm not sure if they rather blindly approved it, or if companies were going outside of that. But there was definitely some products that you knew were flavored with things that you may not want to inhale. And so I was it was kind of a bittersweet moment, because the state was investigating these things, and I thought that was good, but there's never really was any resolution. They never really came out and said anything was actually harmful. There was just a product recall, and that was kind of I think people's gripe, is that they still didn't have any clarity.
Yeah, I think the most alarming thing to me is, well, the twofold most alarming thing to me is that situation is not unique. We have a lot of cannabis programs in a lot of states with a lot of relative ambiguity, similar to what you just said. And the thing that's even worse is the gray market. You think about in places that don't even have a regulated state market, but consumers still want to consume cannabis. They know about cannabis. They want to try to participate in some kind of more legitimate market than buying it from the black market. So you have, these kind of gray area websites, and you have these gray area products at, the gas station or the bodega, that are, Delta 8 based or whatever. And then the regulations there are basically non-existent. So I kind of wish folks would take more notice about this Pennsylvania thing. But I guess what I'll say is that unfortunately, I think there's going to be more of this type of thing to come on the way to having a fully legitimate and safe, or for there to be fully legitimate and safe products on the shelf across the board for consumers, like we see in so many other areas.
Yeah, I agree. For my last question, I just wanted to segue to some psychedelics conversation, and just take a few minutes here to talk about this. And there's been some pretty exciting literature coming out about natural substances like ibogaine and psilocybin and DMT and synthetic compounds like ketamine. And I've read some reports about people trying to combat addiction, reporting that one session of ibogaine was enough to allow them to kick an opioid habit for several years. And I also spoke with Dr. Roger McIntyre in Canada regarding his treatment of patients with ketamine, and he indicated that the results that he's seeing are so startling that they almost seem too good to be true. And I was curious where you saw this resurgent interest in psychedelics going, and if you thought that these molecules truly have the power to change humankind.
Yeah, this is a nice place to wrap up the convo. So, man, I'll just say off the bat, I think it's hugely exciting. I think it's a long time coming. For folks who haven't, read their psychedelics history books, there actually was a fair amount of research going on with psychedelics in kind of the modern Western pharmaceutical sense in the 50s and 60s
Right.
before prohibition really kicked in. And then obviously, if we look at indigenous use and indigenous populations, there's again millennia of research and data collection that wasn't stored on PubMed. It was stored in the culture. So and I'll loop back on that before we close. But so to answer just some of your direct questions, do I think these molecules have the power to change humankind? What I'll say, I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. I often take a holistic approach, and I think those are best. So, can psychedelics cure the ills of capitalism and the lack of caring about environmentalism? Through the whole industrial revolution till now, for the most part, and all these kind of like really like large scale, harms that are happening um, in the society. It's not a one for one fix, but I do think it's an important tool in the toolkit. And I'll further segment just briefly that to me there's two very obvious routes. There's the medicalization route. So you have folks taking existing molecules or modifying existing molecules and taking them through the FDA route for certain indication. And that space is already pretty crowded, but for the folks who can win and who can get a drug through the FDA that has good efficacy, I think that will have some that I think that's great. And I think that's going to help a certain segment of people who like that route. The other route, the other bucket is this non FDA route, just to paint a broad picture, which is what we see with this, decriminalization of entheogens in a lot of different places, and kind of the lack of enforcement around people just being able to more freely discuss and utilize these things in their communities. So that's just kind of a different thing than the medical route. But I will say that I think with the kind of proper structure, I think that decrim can have a big impact as well. And I think that both routes are meaningful. So I know we're just about out of time. I guess the last thing I'll say that I think is really important on this topic, that loops back to what I was saying about the indigenous knowledge in all regards. I'm often a person who likes to think about how did we get here? Like, whose shoulders am I standing on? Whose shoulders are we standing on? And it's hard for me to conceptualize the use of psychedelics without thinking about the indigenous knowledge and about those who came before us, both the indigenous populations as well as folks who, put their own livelihoods and safety on the line to bring these things to the fore. For example, I'm going to see a film about Dr. Sasha Shulgin tonight. He's a great example, the outside of the indigenous. So, anyways, I just like to always say that there's a group, if folks are interested to learn what's going on with preservation of indigenous psychedelics knowledge, and the promotion of it, even in this modern context. There's a group called Shakruna, the Shakruna Institute, that I really like the work they do, and I follow them closely. So again, I feel like I say this to you every question. I could talk about this for hours, but I hope that was a good brief reply to your question.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate you, bringing that last part into the equation with the paying homage to folks that have been, maybe not considered amongst scientific circles, but certainly the evidence that they've had and the knowledge they've had on these plants is pretty remarkable. And I think we always kind of owe that tribute to them. And I appreciate you sharing that group with us as well. So, Dr. Arora, I want to thank you for joining me today and discussing your thoughts on, the future of the cannabis industry and the potential for psychedelics in our lives. I really enjoyed the conversation as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time on Terpenes and Testing, the podcast. Until then, please come visit us at www.terpenesandtesting.com or on one of our social media platforms. Cheers.